Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now, here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
Today's guest is John Ramstead, host of the Eternal Leadership Podcast, entrepreneur, former Navy combat fighter pilot, leadership expert, and near-death accident survivor. We're going to take a journey into the world of a man who helps people learn the joy of living on purpose. Welcome, John, to the Healthier Tech Podcast.
Hey, great to be here, R. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, thank you very much. How are you doing today?
I am doing really good. Fantastic.
Wow. Okay, that's great. So just to kick us off, I mean, your story, it's pretty incredible, both professionally and personally. And I understand you had an accident that kept you in the hospital for 2 years, and I guess this was about 9 years ago. And I was hoping, as a starting point, maybe we could talk about how that led to your current journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, it changed everything. I was up at a ranch in Montana working with a nonprofit, and we were going to go horseback riding to the back of the property. You know, it was just part of our get together, about 15 of us to have lunch. And I'm on a horse that just bolts and takes off, and at a flat out gallop is heading straight at a corral fence, and he won't turn and he won't stop. And I'm absolutely freaking out. And then I remember, at this full gallop, about 20 yards in front of the fence, you know, when you get one of those adrenaline rushes and time slows down, I remember having a moment of perfect clarity, and I thought, this is not going to end well. And that's the last thing I remember. The horse comes into the fence and he bucked so hard, he flipped over and he launched me Superman into a 3-inch steel beam. So it completely caved in the entire left side of my skull. I broke every bone in my skull except my jaw and my cheekbone. I lost 8 teeth, broke my neck in 2 places, shattered my right shoulder. And then to add insult to injury, the next bar down hit my rib cage and crushed the left side of my rib cage, broke all the ribs, and broken ribs punctured my left lung. So we found out later from multiple doctors what happened to me medically was not survivable. There was so much damage. I had a complete and total near-death experience. If that's something you want to talk about, happy to share. But that was a moment that was absolutely transformational for me in my life, and then a very long journey forward.
Yeah. So I'm sorry but just it's a very to share the story. But can you take me from that moment, or maybe not that exact moment, but from that period to your work with Beyond Influence?
Well, you know, it was my goodness, 2.5 years. So I'm in ICU for 5 weeks and had multiple surgeries, 2 brain surgeries, and then I had a severe traumatic brain injury. So I got transferred from Montana, where I was, back to where I live in Denver, Colorado, to Craig Hospital. And I was there as a patient for 20 months with this TBI. I had 23 surgeries. And now imagine this, I'm a year and a half into my recovery, and I'm seeing every possible kind of doctor and therapist along the way. And one of our doctors sits us down, and he's looking at my wife, not me. And he goes, "Hey, I just want to set expectations that, you know, John probably won't be able to be a greeter at Walmart." Wow. Right now, you know, I've been an entrepreneur and, you know, a big goal setter my whole life. I'm like, so it kind of got me fired up a little bit. But here's the thing: is coming out of a brain injury that severe, 2.5 years after the accident, I literally could only work 8 or 9 hours in a week. That's it. I could be focused and have a conversation for a couple hours in the morning, and then literally have to go up to a dark room the entire rest of the day. And then when I finally was able to drive again, I could go meet with somebody. I could not be in a restaurant or any place with noise. My brain couldn't process it. And I'm like, okay, what do? I got to support my family. My wife has been my caregiver for 2.5 years. She's been a stay-at-home mom for 20. She could go back to work, but what does she do after 20 years out of her field as a physical therapist? And that's where I got the idea. Actually, I was sitting down with a friend of mine. He's CEO. We'd known each other before the accident. He goes, "Hey, John, here's everything going on in my life. And my what I'm trying to do in the community and philanthropy with my marriage and my business. And I feel like nothing is really working together the way it should. Whatever I focus on does well, but the other ones languish. He goes, I've decided to hire a coach. He goes, John, you would be a great coach. If you decide to be one, I'll be your first client. I'm like, oh,
Wow.
that's awesome, Greg. I said, what's a coach? Never heard of a business coach.
Tell me more.
I wish I had in the past. So I actually reached out to there's one guy in Denver I knew who was a coach. I'd met him at like a networking event years prior as an executive coach. And I knew he did work with like Google and Microsoft. He's a pretty high level guy. And he basically said, yeah, I called him up and he's like, yeah, don't really want to meet. You know, people call me all the time. I'm like, no problem. He called me back 30 minutes later and goes, man, I just feel like I need to meet with you. And we spent 2 hours together. And he said, you know what, I really wouldn't, you need to do this. And he became a mentor of mine, a mentor coach of mine. And so when I got started, I decided to get into coaching, took coach training. How do I really refine a lot of my leadership skills that I've had over the military and, 25 years as an entrepreneur and building companies and working at Fortune 500 as a senior manager. But here was my problem. I could still only work 8 or 9 hours a week. So I would go down, let's just say like you and Stephanie, like I'd go schedule an 8 o'clock coffee meeting with I'd be done at 9. I'd schedule Stephanie at 10. I would go to my car and set my alarm for 45 minutes and I'd be sound asleep. I could then talk with Stephanie, but then I'd have to go home and spend 2 days resting.
Wow.
And that's how I started my coaching business. Like I felt like I had something to share. I wanted to help people. I wanted to create something. I've always been an entrepreneur. In 6 months into that journey, I literally had one client paying me $500 a month. I almost quit right there, but I didn't know what else I could do. I really honestly felt, because of what happened in the accident, God leading me like this is what I was meant to do. And I kept with it. It was one of the hardest periods of my life, period. I'm still recovering from a TVI, but at the end of the year, I had 13 clients and I was at a 6-figure run rate. And I moved up to maybe 10 to 12 hours a week. And that was 9 years ago, actually about 8 years ago. And then it's been growing ever since.
Wow. That is some serious drive that I think that story demonstrates. In a little more detail, what your coaching consists of, what the work is that you focus on.
Here to summarize it, the entire leadership industry focuses on the why and the what and the how. And I believe those are very important. And we all know people that have made massive careers talking about each one of those. And here's what I've seen from myself and leaders I get to work with. There's a foundational piece to that if it's broken, none of those will work. And that is who you are. Because think about it. I could come and get the best mentorship ever from you. Right? Or go find somebody else who is, a multi-million-dollar coach working, all over the world. And am I guaranteed to get their results? No, I'm not. And the reason is because I might be taking all their best stuff on the who and the what and the why and the how and all these things, and running it through a flawed person. And so a big part of my philosophy was, if I can just help my clients become the best or a better version of themselves, everything else is going to get easier, not easy, but easier. And it's going to get clear. And then when I have a CEO of a company, whether I'm working at the Pentagon or Fortune 100 at the C-suite or a nonprofit in town, and I've just seen it and I work with somebody and they get better, guess what happens is they get that awareness and they build, it's really kind of a journey of emotional intelligence and coupling that with somebody's life experiences. But when they do that, all of a sudden, they now have the ability to help the folks on their team do the same thing. They're going to show up differently if there's a conflict. They're going to handle making decisions. They're going to let go of their need to control or perfectionism. There's so many things that all of a sudden just start being shed as we go through this process. And then I just love being a little part or a big part, whatever that is, in that equation of a catalyst of both an individual, a team, and an organization's success. And the people I love to work with are I would call them mission-driven entrepreneurs. And their company exists not only for what they do, but the impact that they want to have in the lives of their people, or maybe in the community, or a cause, or something like that. Those are the people that I love to work with.
So I'm curious, and I actually have no idea how you're going to answer this question, but as you begin this
Yeah, me
process with a
either.
client, yeah, how do you know, or how does the client know what the best version of themselves is? Or how do you know when you get there? How do you know what even to aim at?
Well, let's just take yourself, Far. If you think back, even over the last few years, through all the adversity that we had in COVID, and probably economically, and in the business, what were those times where you just felt like, man, nailed it? What was going on? What were those times when you just had those bright moments in your relationships? It's really a process of really understanding one's core values. It's a big thing that I write about in my books. A lot of us have what I call our should values. This is how I think I should show up. This is what I think I should do, who I should be. And there's this huge schism between who we think we need to be to succeed in a certain role and actually who we are. So looking at core values, looking at our passions, those things that just ignite us, and it might be something we monetize or not, it doesn't matter. What are our skills, our talents, and our gifts? And as we start to put all those together, it starts to create a map for people to just, I'm a huge fan of just small steps. How do we just get incrementally better in maybe what we do or why we do it? And if we can slowly make progress in both of those areas, and we start moving up and to the right in our life, and all of a sudden we can get to this place that, here's an interesting question. When I was first getting started, I went and interviewed 10 CEOs that I thought would be like my ideal target audience. And some of them were faith-based and some of them weren't. It was a big spectrum. I just wanted to get a lot of different insights. Here's one thing that every single CEO said at some point during that interview conversation. Big fan of Ryan Levesque's Ask method. This is where it came from, by the way. But all of them said something like this: I would love to live life more fully. Or, man, I would love to be fully alive. Or, man, I would like to just enjoy life. Now, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to get there, but I know that I do not have it. And then what I found was working with people on just slowly peeling back that best version of themselves, the person that doesn't get upset and start yelling at their kids, the person that comes home and wants to just love on their wife, even if she is not having her best day. You know what I'm saying? Because usually I would respond to that. I would react in kind, right? And when we start understand what are the, we all have the same set of facts that happen, right? Relationally, the dynamics. But then based on all this stuff in our life and our history and our identity, we start spinning a narrative out of that. And it's a narrative that's usually self-serving. And often that narrative is deceived. And it's not informing us on how to either make the best decision, show up in the best way, be that better version of ourselves. And as we start to and it's a process. I tell my clients that I don't work with anybody for less than 6 months, because what I found is the first couple months of self-discovery is a lot of fun. And then you go, oh my gosh, I got a lot of crap in my trunk that I got to clean out. And then the real work starts. And I find usually there's this big lull in the 2-3 month kind of time frame, because now we're talking about making some personal change. And I always tell my clients up front that we have to work through that. That's why I won't work with anybody for less than 6 months without exception. And you need to prepay for all 6 months up front, because I got tired of people getting frustrated and they're like, they back off from the coaching, or they'd not schedule a meeting, and then it'd be a month and then you lose the connection. And I'm like, no, if I have limited time and I'm going to really work with somebody, I want to work with somebody that truly is willing to put in the work that I did to just get to a place. And I'll tell you today, my marriage after 33 years, my relationship with all my boys was horrible. Today, they're my best friends. 2 of them have already reached out to me this morning, texted me and called and just said, hey, Pops, how you doing? Right? Life is very limited. I'm still recovering. I'm in pain every day, but I get to be here and I'm alive. And I just live from a place of just deep gratitude, which has also been a game changer. I don't know if that answers a long answer to
It was a
No, that was-
a
great
deep
answer. It
question,
was
but how's that?
wonderful.
No, that was fantastic. So, well, I feel good because I'm going to get to give you an opportunity, right? To because you like working with mission-driven companies. You're on the Healthier Tech podcast, and we are driven by a mission of helping people work through the process of figuring out how to establish healthier relationships with technology. Because technology it's everywhere. It's part of every action and transaction, whether we explicitly recognize it or not. So as a next step, I was hoping to try to get a deeper understanding of the role of technology in your coaching process. So as a starting point, does it factor in? Do your clients' behaviors with their technology hamper their performance, or are there ways in which they're able to use it to their advantage in advancing through this process?
Yes, well, here in this, what you're doing is so important because we have transitioned. We were transitioning, and then COVID accelerated it to this higher tech world, a more disparate workforce. More people wanted to be hybrid, but then in that, how do we develop high touch relationships in a high tech world? Right? It's something a lot of people have been figuring out. Hey, how do I do that well? How do I have the same connection with my team when I'm not in the office with them? Right? How do I have a connection as a coach with a CEO of a Fortune 100 company who is in New Jersey and we've literally never met in person? And there's no way I could do that without technology, Zoom or using the phone. But I got to tell you, it's about being in this higher tech world, right? To maintain high touch actually takes more intentionality for me to reach out. If we were working together as a team and we're all, let's say the three of us are all in different states, right? We could be doing our thing and then we jump on a Zoom meeting and we check in, but then we go back. And all of a sudden, like just over time, there's just not that connection. So what do you do? I think like for our teams, I can go into some specific things that you want, but I would I guess a headline would be, do not let technology be an excuse on why you can't have deep, meaningful relationships in this hybrid world that we live in. Because what I have found is, like, I just had my mastermind group that I've been running, a group of 10 CEOs. We have not met in person in a year. And they all just came to my house for like, only 2 of the 12 people I'd met in person. And it was like I'd known these folks forever. Now, being in person was absolutely a blessing. It was awesome. But I don't know, that's my high level is don't let it be an excuse, the fact that it's that you can't have excellence in relationships and culture in a team because we're now in a new working environment.
I like that. I appreciate that. So do you think that you're seeing people are using it as some kind of excuse in terms of their professional, interpersonal relationships?
I see that with maybe it's leaders my age, I'm 55, are right. So I know that the clients I coach with who are my age, they just want everybody to come back in the office because that's their comfort zone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So they're like, we need to come back in the office. And then they try to roll that out. And then all their younger employers are like, oh, no, not happening. I'm just going to leave. Right. Like, because I can go get paid just as much and I can be home with my dog and I can come into the office maybe once or twice a week. And so I've seen people use that as an excuse for, because they say it's harder and they get frustrated. And when we allow ourselves to get that place, what I think is, then you know what, you're not going to be as proactive. I'm not going to reach out and just maybe text Stephanie and say, hey, how was your weekend? I'm not going to show up and just say, hey, this is what I do with my team. I'm just like, hey, I'm sitting here working. Anybody else, right now? And we'll actually just jump on Zoom and we'll all have our cameras on and we'll have it on mute. And we'll all just be working in the background just so we have some company. And we'll be playing, somebody will be playing the music and we'll kind of swap around. People get to play their different playlists. But then if I have a question, I come off mute and go, hey, Stephanie, man, I'm stuck with this thing, man. Can I throw this up on the screen and let me know what you think of this copy I just wrote? And Stephanie goes, oh, wow, that's, yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that's not going to help you. Right. But all of a sudden you're just, you know, what you're trying to do is bring some things into that environment. And all of a sudden you're just having a ball. We'd get together and do happy hours a couple times a week. I don't know, there's just a lot you can do in this environment that I think that, here's what I think is either technology, you just got to look at what you have. It is either a constraint to your culture and your productivity, or it is an accelerator and it's a differentiator for your company to your culture and what you're trying to accomplish. And if it's not that accelerator, if that was your answer, you need to reach out to people like R and Stephanie who've made it an accelerator, because you need to get there. And I'm telling you, you absolutely can get there. My team now is, after 8 years, and you heard the start, right? 12 coaches, 4 employees, preferred leadership vendor to the US Air Force. I mean, things have exploded. There is no way, and I have 1 employee that's in Denver. One of those, actually 2 of those entire team are here in Denver, but one's an hour and a half away north of here. And we have built that as a completely remote team over the last 8 years, even before COVID.
So you were well positioned for the
yes, that was for us.
Yeah.
Nothing really changed. Quite frankly. Yeah. Actually, the nice thing for me was all these training events we had all over the country, because I usually fly all over and do it in person. We got to switch, and I actually just got to come right here in this office, and I got everything all set up with multiple cameras and an ATEM video switcher and in different inputs. So just to create this incredible training and teaching experience. Our reviews from our attendees, and we're doing 2, 3, and 4 day courses virtually in front of a screen like this, 7, 8 hours a day. Our reviews went up. The last course that we did to a group of very senior leaders from one of the Air Force bases was 10 out of 10 from all 15 attendees. And this was a 3-day course of senior leaders. So technology in that environment absolutely enabled us to over deliver what our customers were expecting.
That's interesting. Have you found that, or have you built in, or maybe you already did because you are so familiar and used to kind of a telecommuting environment, have you found that you're bringing that relationship building aspect more into your program, especially since COVID, because we have so many people who are just not used to this, not used to working, remotely?
Well, yeah, well, here's, you bring up a great point. You know what? When COVID first hit, and I realized that, I had a small percentage of my clients that their businesses were booming, and other ones that were absolutely on life support. Some of them didn't make it. And here's what I realized is people are going to remember during this time how I showed up, right? And who I was. I reached out to all of my existing clients, past clients, and even people that had not hired me in the past. And I just said, what can I do to serve you? What can I do to add value? I'm not going to charge you. Can I come in and do something for your team? Can I show you guys how to work remote? Can I help you solve a problem? And I every day I was having these amazing conversations. And then without even asking, people started coming back and say, John, we want to work with you again. And we can pay you. We can't pay you what we paid before, or maybe it was new. And then here's the other thing though, on how I've built my last 4 companies. And that is, I'm huge about staying in touch with somebody. So let's just say I meet you, Stephanie. I'm like, wow, Stephanie's cool. This is my quick and dirty. And how I use technology to do this. I call it my 26 touch method, but I would categorize people as an A, B, or C. So an A is somebody I absolutely either wanted as a client, could refer me to a client, or just somebody who's so cool that I just wanted to really stay in touch with. And I'm going to reach out to you every 2 weeks. Okay. A B is somebody I think could be a client, might refer me, or just that neat person you don't want to, lose touch with. Maybe they could hire me or work with me at some point. And a C are just, friends, family, college fraternity brothers, people you met a couple years ago at a networking meeting. You don't want to go, oh my gosh, what was that guy's name? He was so cool. Doug. Yeah, Doug. Man, it was years ago at that speaker conference. And so bad, shame on me. I should have thrown Doug in the bucket. But Here's what I do though. I put all that in my CRM, and I have about no more than 25 A's, no more than 30 B's, and no more than 30 C's. And guess what though? I reach out to people with this, either a phone call, a text, an email, and none of it is soliciting. Let's, Stephanie, like, what's a hobby of yours, Stephanie?
Photography.
Okay. So I might actually Google something and say, hey, here's a killer article on how to take professional videos on an iPhone 13. Like when you're out and about with your friends, I know you love photography. Man, I hope you're having an awesome day. Keep rocking, John. That would be my touch base to you, even though you maybe could be my ideal client. And then if people are in town or Zoom, I would also weave in there, hey, let's talk in person. And then guess what? In my CRM, that I'm using this as this incredible tool, because if you look at that number of people divided by, over, 90 days, there's only 3 to 5 people a day that are popping up. And I can sit here and reach out and have a touch point with and build relationships with 90 people on 5 or 10 minutes a day. Anybody can do that. And by doing that, all of a sudden you're using technology to enable relationship building, conversations, staying front of mind, helping people solve problems. And that inevitably leads to, can you help me with this specifically? Could I hire you to do this? And then, I'm always just a huge abundance mindset person. And I'm very quick to say, you know what? I'm not the guy. You know what? I don't have that expertise, but I have a friend. You need to talk to them. And I would much rather have you work with somebody who I know is going to it's right in their wheelhouse than maybe try something just because I might need a paycheck. And in doing that, I think that's why our business has grown so big.
Yeah. If you sent me that text and, we had just a conversation, we met at a conference and you sent me a text like that, I'd be like, I can't believe he remembered. That's my thing. We were talking about conference stuff and that just came up. That's really, that's a great strategy and approach to building out the network. And then of course, in the end, building out your business.
Yeah. And I used to do that on spreadsheets, but now I use a CRM. And you know what the best CRM is? I figured out, you know what the best CRM is?
No, I was actually going to ask you when the recording is over what you use.
Oh yeah. Here's the best CRM. One that you log into every day.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm convinced it doesn't matter what you pick. You just got to use it.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So I maybe you just answered this question, but what would one specific practice that my listeners can try to work on be to optimize their performance, to help find out what the best version of themselves is and move towards it?
Well, if it's okay to put in a shameless plug, I would say read my book, On Purpose with Purpose. But here was honestly, my quest and my prayer every day since the accident was, I kept seeking to get understanding of think about it, right? There's the person you see in the mirror, and then you have that best version of yourself. And I think we are much more aware of what this gap is when we're really real with ourselves. And my thing was, what is one thing I can do today, even if it's really small, that I could work on today just to help me be a little better? And sometimes I failed and it's frustrating, but I love what Tony Robbins says. We totally overestimate what we can do in a year and we completely underestimate what could happen in a decade. So it's been virtually a decade since my accident. My marriage was we were about to file for divorce. My kids didn't like me and I was miserable because I was working so many hours running a company. And I have the opposite life now, 10 years later. And it was just a journey of many, many small steps, failures, setbacks, learning. And, regardless of technology, I think when technology is a tool to help us get more done more efficiently, and if it's not, go get some help. But we need to be working on ourselves. That's my one tip. What is that one thing you might want to work on today? And I would encourage people. I'm a huge reader. I read 3 or 4 books every month. And over the last 10 years, a lot of those have been on mindset and habits and emotional intelligence and relationships and all these areas that I knew I just wanted to have excellence in. And I found mentors and I found coaches. So this is something I said, okay, if I want the results, am I willing to put in the work to get there? because some of this isn't easy, but we can make it easier.
As we wind up this interview, I want my listeners to know that they can learn more about you at beyondinfluence.com. And your book is available at beyondinfluence.com/book. And also they can listen to you on your Eternal Leadership podcast. Are there other places you'd like the listeners to go connect with you or take action?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, John Ramstead, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's all John Ramstead, John.Ramstead. So I'm all over the place and love to connect with you.
Excellent. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. So, John, this first off, incredibly inspirational story. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come onto the Healthier Tech podcast and then sharing specifically your insight into the role of technology in both business improvement and personal improvement and just a post-pandemic reality that we're all kind of just grappling with day to day. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's great meeting you all.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.